right, everyone. I think we will start. Welcome. Thank you for joining and participating in this candidate forum. I'm going to briefly introduce the candidates here for the Oregon's 4th Judicial District. It's position 12 here in Multnomah County. It's a rare opportunity to have an open seat on the bench, and so got a lot of very talented people who are participating in this campaign, and I am going to do a brief introduction for the 5 candidates by alphabetical order of last name, and then I'll turn it over to them. First, we have Adrian Brown, currently serves as an assistant United States attorney for the District of Oregon, previously served as a United States Air Force JAG officer. We have Rima Ghandour, the principal attorney at Ghandour Law, LLC, where she has an emphasis in trial work, handling a wide variety of cases, ranging from construction and product defect to personal injury cases. Sonia Montalbano, an attorney at McKean Smith with a focus in areas of employment and business law and an emphasis in litigation at both the state and federal level. John Schlosser, a criminal defense attorney working in both public and private defense, as well as in domestic relations and civil litigation. And Ernest Warren, managing partner for Warren and Sugarman. His firm focuses on personal injury, real property, corporate, and criminal practice. So as a first question, I thought I would just start with that order, and then we can reverse the order for the next question, and then I'll mix it up for the third. But the first question that I just wanted to turn over to you, Adrian, was why did you want to become a lawyer, and what values have guided your career, and what has prompted you to seek this?
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to become a lawyer because I wanted to serve in the public interest. In fact, I started my legal quest thinking I wanted to work in environmental law, and that's what brought me out to Lewis and Clark. So I had graduated from Indiana University with a degree in public policy, and I came out here thinking I wanted to do environmental law, and then I got a little taste of the courtroom during a clerkship that I did at the JAG office up at Fairchild Air Force Base in between my first and second year of law school, and then at the U.S. Attorney's Office as a law clerk, and as a law clerk with now Judge Angel Lopez. And I got a very fire lit under me to want to continue to be in litigation. And so I continued to pursue that effort, and then throughout my JAG service, I prosecuted over 40 trials over the 7 years and defended and prosecuted before a jury over 40 trials throughout the 7 years I was in the JAG. And between that and the last 10 years of working on civil rights issues, I have been extremely interested in doing what I can to help the entire system. And that's what has brought me to become not only a lawyer, but an interested litigator in the work of the public. And I want to continue that service through helping the entire system as a judicial leader, as a judge.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adrian. Rima, what made you want to become a lawyer, and what values have guided your career?
Hi, Mick. So I came to the US when I was 18. When I went to college, I got a crash course in American politics, in American legal system, and history. And living overseas, I'd always, this beautiful idea of the protections that are supposed to be present in the US legal system. That's always been something that's been like a shining beacon, because I grew up where those ideals were not there. So before I came, I had heard such great things about the legal system, sort of fell in love with it in undergrad, and decided that that's where I was gonna go. Of course, there's no system that's perfect. Through the years, the holes showed themselves, but I still love what we do, and using what we do for the greater good. And those are the values I brought. Again, I firmly believe that our democracy the judicial system is a pillar of the democracy, and without it, we cannot have it. And growing up where democracy is not present and is under attack all the time, just brought all of these issues to the forefront. And to be able to be strong, you need to treat everybody equally. You need to increase access to justice. Everybody should be able to participate in the system. And if they don't, you do not have justice. So those are the values I've brought with me. And this is why I became an attorney. And through all my volunteer work, and whether with the community at large or the legal system, I've been working towards those values.
Wonderful. Sonia, what?
Thank you for this opportunity. I grew up in New York, and I am the daughter of immigrant family. And New York is this beautiful melting pot of so many different cultures and languages and religions and people. And I was taught, you have the opportunity to give back, because this country is a gateway, and it's a gateway for us to have better opportunities. So you have an obligation to give back. And so that's one of the foundations of who I am. I also grew up with the belief, oh, well, but if you come to America, you can do anything if you work hard. And as I got older, I realized that's actually not true for everybody, and it made me mad. And I wanted to do something that would have an impact on a lot of people's lives. And I thought the best way to do that would be to go into politics or policymaking. And you know, like Adrian, I am passionate, really cared about the environment. And I thought, well, I'll study environmental law, and then I'll go make better environmental laws. And so I came out to Oregon, went to Lewis and Clark, was committed to that. And then in my second year, I took clinic, and my life changed. I helped a woman get her child support modified, and I helped a gentleman get his unemployment after he had been denied. And that was when I realized, as much as I cared about the environment and was an activist, I really wanted to be an advocate for people who were having everyday problems in their everyday lives. And so totally did a 180, shifted my focus on working with people. And then for 23 years, I've worked in the Multnomah County courts representing people who have had their wages wrongfully withheld from them, discriminated against, harassed, wrongfully fired, people who have been significantly personally injured. I also represent a lot of businesses, and I help them navigate their way through the legal system so they don't have to hire lawyers later on. I hate that people have to hire lawyers. Then I've also, you know, in my community work, continued to want to give back to society and make it better. And I've done that working with, I've been on the board of Southeast Works, a great organization that helps offenders avoid finding themselves back in jail. I've been on the steering committee of the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, which was helping to get politicians elected who cared about the environment. And I've been for 10 years on the advisory committee for the Campaign for Equal Justice, raising money for legal aid and educating the public about why funding legal aid is so critical, because I think there's a real disconnect there. People don't get it. So that's my whole perspective on being a lawyer. You're here to serve and help people.
Wonderful. John?
Thank you. Well, let's see. I didn't want to be a lawyer. It was like the furthest thing from my mind for most of my life. If you'd asked me when I was in college, when I was an undergrad, what is the last thing you'd want to be, I would have told you an attorney. I was going to be a research scientist. Life took a weird turn, and I ended up working for a company where I got into a car accident, and I had to go through the legal process there. And it was I ended up with, I wasn't going to be able to return to like that kind of physical labor anymore. So I was thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to med school, go back to grad school? But it was my workers' compensation attorney who was like, well, they have the best environmental law program in the country over here. You could try to help the environment that way. And that's what I did. Why I went there. And then I realized pretty quickly that that's not for me. And found myself drawn to criminal law. And so I did a quick shift there, and as far as the values that have guided my career, My parents were big proponents of service, community service, things like that, and not like forced, but just showing us, me and my sisters, the how helping others can help yourself in a lot of different ways. So I've always had that in the background of my mind, and then I've gone through some pretty difficult stuff in my life. I'm a crime victim. I've had lots of friends that have had substance abuse issues and stuff like that. And so when I was in law school, I was thinking, well, maybe I want to be a prosecutor. I really liked the Multnomah County DA's office, and my mentor in law school at the time was a judge, but he had worked there. And I thought, well, it'd be kind of nice to be able to help people that way. Didn't work out. Just career-wise, it didn't work out that way. I love what I do now because I still get to help people. I still get to help them, people who are treated wrongfully by the system. I get to help them advocate for themselves and take their cases to trial. And people who might not otherwise be being wrongfully treated, I get to try to help them figure out how to get their lives back on track. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Ernest?
Hello, Ernest Warren, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. When I was about 10 years old, my parents used to send me with my grandfather out into the fields, picking berries and beans, apples around Portland. And one day I came home and my dad, who I love dearly, guy who went to Lincoln High School, told me, he said, son, there's only 3 professions in life: doctor, lawyer, or preacher. Which one of them do you want to be? And I said, I'm not sure, Dad. Let me think about that. And it was a Saturday, and I didn't have to do anything. And I woke up and noontime came, and Perry Mason came on the television. And I seen him pull up in that beautiful black Lincoln and go to court. And I said, that's what I want to be. Dad, I want to be a lawyer. And ever since then, since 10 years old, I pursued being a trial lawyer. When I was at the Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law at Arizona State University, I was, as a certified law student, I had 15 trials as a prosecutor for the city of Phoenix. Down there, their system is a lot different. In Scottsdale, most of the DUII attorneys are privately retained. So winning 12 of those trials, I was like, man, this is not what I thought. I thought it would be more challenging, like Perry Mason, or that you could get a defendant to say, I did it. But it didn't work that way. So when I came up to Portland and reconnected with my family and friends, ever since I've represented people for 31 years. Against big governments, against prosecutors, against big corporations. And I fight for the people, whether they're indigent or whether I'm going to get a contingency fee at the end of the case. And that seems to be where we need more attorneys. We don't need less attorneys. We need more attorneys that are going to fight for people, because the corporations and the insurance companies and the federal government and the state governments are all full of lawyers who are being paid to fight on their interests. What we need is for people to fight for people, little people that can't afford a lawyer, people that have righteous claims. And we need judges that will righteously listen and always do what's right and don't be swayed by the wrong things.
Great, Ernest.
And I hope and pray that's what I've done for 1 year.
Wonderful, thank you. And let's stay with you. I have another question here, and so we can move back down the line. I also want to point out to any of the participants that there is a question and answer feature. If you have any questions you want to submit, and we have time for that at the end, then I will do my best to address those, or to present them, I should say, to our participants. The second question, and we'll start again with you, Ernest, is what do you think are the most important issues facing Multnomah County from a judicial perspective as we move into this new and interesting time?
Well, now that we have a serious coronavirus, things have been shaken to the core, particularly in criminal cases. 95% of what a Multnomah County judge does are criminal matters. And we have to do, and what we're balancing always as a criminal judge, mercy versus punishment. Punishment for public safety, mercy for those who are deserving of a second chance. Those are hard decisions that a judge has to make. It becomes particularly hard. I think that Rod Underhill and the DA are doing a great job of it, and the Portland Police Bureau, in that they are sifting through those people who are most dangerous and detaining them at the Multnomah County Detention Center. So arraigning people for non-serious criminal cases is going to become a challenge. How we face it now, we go to our grocery store, they got a big window up in front for people not to breathe on each other. I think that's going to be a big concern for the way we handle business in Multnomah County. Right now, we're doing a lot of civil cases by phone, trial readiness by phone, things where we actually appeared in person. And hopefully we can get the money and the resources to start doing it by video, like we're doing it now. So we can have a little bit more of a human interaction. But the jury trial is going to be always the savior for the whole justice system. We got to maintain that, and we got to protect those jurors, and we got to make them feel safe, and we got to get the right advocates up there to advocate strongly for both sides so the truth can always be heard. And so those are the challenges that I see that face the court, particularly now, the new court with the Elmo in the back of the parties, rather than where it should be, like in the federal courts. We really are going to have to figure that out.
Great, Ernest. Thank you so much. John, what do you think are some of the issues, both related to the kind of new world we're living in and also just in general? What are the most important issues facing Multnomah County from a judicial perspective?
Well, yeah, I kind of will echo what Ernie was saying in large part. One thing that I'd like to see be, I'm not sure to what extent it is really in Multnomah County, but courts getting comfortable with utilizing functions like this, like video platforms and things like that, to be able to effectuate pleas, assuming somebody wants to enter a plea. One of the big issues we're going to have here is a few months from now, a absolute deluge of criminal cases flooding the court because nobody's getting arraigned right now. People are getting citations in lieu of arraignments. So those people aren't getting appointed attorneys, the ones who would otherwise get appointed attorneys. So a few months from now, we're just going to have hundreds and hundreds of cases flooding through the system. And it's going to be an absolute nightmare. Having a judge on the judges on the bench that have experience in criminal matters, I think is going to be important to help facilitate that getting pushed through. But I think if the court can get comfortable with doing pleas while also protecting people's health through platforms like this, I think that would be great. And then beyond, outside of the COVID state of affairs, I think expanding on treatment courts is probably, at least from the criminal court perspective, is probably the most important thing facing courts right now. It is, it helps reduce recidivism. It helps prevent people from suffering life-crippling convictions on their records. we can, one thing that I want to do is add a restorative justice court, and that scenario, it also helps heal the community and the person, the offender, and everybody as a whole. And I think that helps build confidence in the justice system itself.
Great, thank you. Sonia?
I think the biggest issue facing the Multnomah County courts today is the same as facing courts throughout the country, and it's access to justice. And we hear that term a lot, and I like to break it down and say, what does that mean? At its most basic level, it means representation, having a lawyer assist you if you find yourself in the legal system. But it also means being able to go into the court and not be prejudged or judged because of the color of your skin. It means being able to have a judge or a jury hear your case in a timely fashion. It means being able to go into the court physically, get there, understand what's going on while you're in there, and be in there and not be afraid that you're going to be grabbed by ICE and deported. It means being able to have your case decided by a jury and not have it decided by an arbitration panel because it's something that you've signed in a contract that had 50 pages, and not being caught up in the court system when you shouldn't be there. There are people, as both Ernie and John pointed out, that are going to be, there's going to be a flood of criminal cases, and they're going to be consisting of a large number of people with mental health care issues, houselessness issues, and addiction issues. And that's not where these people belong. The court system, it's a cornerstone of a functioning society. And all of those things I listed are barriers to getting fair and impartial outcomes. And after COVID-19, in addition to the flood of criminal cases that we're going to have a flood of civil cases, because right now you have people who are not making any money. There is a state of emergency and you don't have to pay rent during this time. When the state of emergency ends, which right now is in July, people are going to have to start paying their bills and make up all the rent that they haven't paid, and they have 6 months to do that. But I know as a business lawyer, businesses are not going back to business right away. They are going to ramp up very slowly. People are afraid that there's going to be another infection. People are going to come back slowly. So July, August, September, none of these people are going to have money to pay their bills. They're all going to end up in the court system. And so we need to be doing things now to be prepared for that. And I think some of the things we need to do are directing as much money as we can to legal aid and criminal public defenders. I think we need to be getting mental health care resources ready to be in the court to help the people that are going to find themselves there. We've had people who were hanging by a thread before COVID-19. They're off the cliff now, and they're going to need someone there to help them. And then the third thing we need to be doing is we need to be working with the governments, both on a local and a state level, to extend deadlines for people to catch up financially. Because if we don't do this, I mean, we need to do it. And once we do that, just to address the COVID-19 flood, then we still need to knock down all of those other barriers that are impediments to access to justice.
Great, thank you. Rima?
Yeah, so prior to COVID hitting, we were already not functioning at full capacity. The courts were not open as much as they can be. The amount of self-represented parties have been increasing because of a lack of access to attorneys. Those are all already present, and even though there's organizations and people working on that, like the Multnomah Bar Association, and trying to help with the self-represented kiosks at the new courthouse, and maybe having somebody there to assist people coming into the courthouse, the need was so great, and already under access was not there. And then COVID has hit. Sorry about the beep. And right now, the amount of people who are impacted and will continue to be impacted, it's not just criminal cases. It is all kinds of civil cases. It's landlord-tenant. It's contract disputes. It's trying to for businesses trying to get out of leases that they are stuck in when they cannot pay. There is a whole bunch of fraud going on against people, and that's one of the other issues. And then you have an increase in homelessness that's going to occur if the legislature and our elected officials don't do something about it. All of those. And the trauma from living through COVID and the stress that it's brought is also going to result in a whole bunch of different issues. Our family courts are going to be flooded too. So those are the immediate issues facing us. And for Multnomah County, we are in the middle of preparing for a move to the new courthouse. And that's supposed to happen in July, right in the middle of all of this. So again, underfunded, resources are tight, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with COVID now. The number of cases coming through after we open, however that's going to look like for the next 6 months. But then there's also the threat of a second and possibly a third wave of COVID. And how do we prepare so that we are ready to actually keep functioning, keep serving the community, keep the courts as open as possible so victims can get a hearing, so things can continue. So those are the immediate issues facing the courthouse and the judges who will be serving in the courthouse and the decision making that will happen.
Wonderful, thank you. Adrian?
Yes, thank you. So the way I understand the question is that what is the most important issues facing Multnomah County from a judicial perspective? And while there are certainly a lot of the things that my opponents have talked about here are definitely issues facing the court, not all of those things may be concerns for the entire county. But one thing that is a major concern for the county that is at the center of the courts and has been thrusted before the courts for a while, but it's even more magnified now, is access to mental health services. And the reason why this is one of the core issues that's facing the county and facing the courts are all the intersections of the other issues that are combined with that, such as where are our police resources being utilized? What is the issues surrounding houselessness, and not just affordable housing, but housing for the most vulnerable, veterans and addiction issues. And those issues come before the courts through the specialty courts, such as Judge Waller's mental health court and Judge Block's START court. Those judges have endorsed me because I bring experience to bear in this regard. And this is where it matters. As we mentioned, there's going to be a flood of cases, a flood of issues, people who are already vulnerable or even more vulnerable now. And COVID has just exposed those gaps even greater. And so having someone with leadership experience in this field matters. And my expertise in working on systemic reform of community mental health care as well as policing practices over the past 10 years is something that I can bring forward to the court to help move the work of the court forward. Now, certainly COVID has other related issues with making sure that jurors are able to come into the court safely. And honestly, it is, I think, a big testament to our community to see that people are still interested. The court is still working on having jury trials, and it's certainly not a fix for everything right now, but currently there are jurors coming in and they're being spaced appropriately for social distancing measures. So it's taking about 6 courtrooms to do one trial. So that's clearly not going to be sustainable. And so how is this sustainable? And what we need to do is we need to ask stakeholders who are involved, how can we do better at making sure the court is accessible? And the Portland Tribune recently published an op-ed that I wrote on this exact issue, that this is a time that we can let the light in and really get information from a variety of stakeholders and people accessing the system. And so some of the issues we may not even know yet until we start asking the questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And so obviously one of the most important elements to achieve the kind of criminal justice reform or developments that you're all advocating for in your respective platforms is enough funding to make sure that the judiciary can function and that we have, quality judges, of course, and so on. So there's been an ongoing conversation about state funding for the judiciary in Oregon, and maybe Sonia, starting with you, and I'll just kind of mix the order of this last question up. What do you feel is a way to tackle that in a meaningful way?
I think that one of the biggest barriers to getting adequate legal funding for the judicial system is a lack of appreciation from the perspective of the public of how a well-functioning judicial system impacts them, even if they're not caught up in it themselves. Justice Martha Walters was interviewed last year, and she made this point about judicial funding. The judicial branch is 1/3 of the government, and you'd think they get 1/3 of the funding, and we get 2.2%. And in 2008, the judicial branch, along with all of the other departments of government, had to tighten their belts because of the recession, and they cut their budgets drastically. It has been 12 years now since then. Until very recently, the economy was going great. You'd think that we'd have restored those funds. We have not. Our population has increased in 10 years by 11%. Staffing has gone down by 12%. We have it's either 1 or 3 circuit courts in Oregon that are open from 8 to 5. We don't have jury trials some days because we don't have the staff. It's really, really bad. And so I think you have to present, as I said, information to the public. How does this impact me? And why is this happening? There have been a lot of studies about funding for the judiciary, and there's not a lot of public support because people believe that there's inefficiency, there's too many lawsuits, or there's a lot of maneuvering by lawyers, and that's what's clogging up the system. We need to make people understand that the judicial system is functioning the way it is because of a lack of resources, a lack of judges to hear cases, a lack of technology, a lack of staff, and that's all because of funding. And then we also have to demonstrate that when we have money, we do things with it where we work very efficiently. And so what I would like to see us going forward is, I do want to see more money going to public defenders and people who work for legal aid, and I want their salaries raised. I would love to see that, and I'll fight for that at the legislature. It's one of the few things you can argue for as a judge. I do think we need more specialty courts that can connect people to resources rather than punishing them and getting them caught up in the criminal justice system. I want to see court navigators. A lot of times when people have chronic illnesses and they're going to the hospital a lot, they have patient navigators. I want court navigators. I would like to see us use technology more. We've learned how to do that as a court very recently because of COVID. Let's keep some of those things because that will help us be more efficient. We have a whole generation that's much more proficient with technology than we've been in the past. So I think if we do that, then we get the public support behind us, then we get more money.
Great, thanks. Ernie, what are your thoughts on funding for the judiciary and how to address some of the shortfalls that we may have experienced and are still experiencing in the last few years?
I can tell you, when I started college at Willamette University in 1978, the reason we have the mental health issue problem now is because before that time, they would send our mentally health folks to Fairview in Salem, and they would live there, and the law changed and the funding from the federal government changed for that, and they started put back into the community systems. When they came back into the community systems, the city of Portland, the county of Multnomah, and any local government did not have the funds because the funds were being cut. The funds were all spent a generation behind us on pensions and so forth. And now the heaviest cost of government are the pensions that people enjoy, and we want them to enjoy it. And there was a promise that was made, but now it's being paid by the current taxpayers. And so that's how we have the mental health problem that we had in the way that it was dealt with before and the way it's dealt with now. Certainly you have to go down to the legislature and like a trial, you have to put on a case for why judges in the court system, the system of justice needs more money. You got to understand the budgets that it has to run the court system here in Multnomah County. I've been on Rod Underhill's budget committee and been the chairman of his budget committee for 2 years ago, but I've been on the committee for 4 years. So I understand how the DA has been pinched over time and how their ability to prosecute is hampered. I understand the government's Ted Kulingowski has endorsed me, our former governor. If we go down the list, it's Margaret Carter, the former Senate president. We got Justice Richard Baldwin on the Supreme Court. We got Judges Yolanda Watkins, Ted Sims out in Washington County, Melvin O'Nor, Ken Walker, Jan Wires, and many people that support me because they know I understand these problems. But like Michael McShane, my good friend who I started criminal defense practice with, he started before me, but I was there in 1989. What I saw of him is when we went down to the legislature together. And when we went down to the legislature together, we went there for a purpose. And we got our purpose achieved, and that's what has to happen.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Ernie. Rima, what are your thoughts on this question about funding?
Yeah, so I've been pretty actually intimately involved with this issue for Multnomah County Courthouse for the last 5 years as I served on the MBA committee. And it is, the lack of fund is going to affect every and each of our residents, every and each one of them. And I've gone and testified in the last couple of years, both in Portland and Salem, to the Ways and Means and the budget committees to try to get us more funding. I've sent letters. And what I would like to see is I would like to see more lawyer engagement. When we went down to Salem, it was a handful. The letters, not that many, because I think we get complacent and we're like, it's somebody else's problem. So I think as lawyers, we need to get involved. We need to talk to the stakeholders we deal with and say, hey, come and support us. I brought a couple community members with me when I went and testified at the Ways and Means for them to explain to the people making the decisions why it's important. How is it affecting somebody that's not just a lawyer or involved in the legal system? How is it affecting everybody when we don't have the funds to run the county court as we need to? So I think it is super important. I think we need to keep doing it. We need to get everybody to do it. We need to share the stories of how that day in court affects and change the life of a client of ours, or how the lack of, because they couldn't get a trial in time, or they couldn't get a lawyer in time, or didn't have the money to pay a lawyer, how that affects them. And when we share these stories, when it comes not just about us working in the system, but a story about everybody, that's how we can get the change. And, you know, going back to the answer to my first question, our judicial system is one of the 3 pillars of our democracy. For it to be acting and operating underfunded for since the last recession, and the fear of what's going to happen, because it will be easy to cut our budget, right? You don't see the effects right away. There are long-lasting effects. So that's my fear. That's what we need to really, really fight for, because we need to make sure that that those long-lasting, and we'll see it for years to come, results from cutting the budget don't happen, because we don't get our budget cut. And if anything, we get more judges and more staff and ability to convert to modern technology for the next COVID or next pandemic or next disaster that's gonna potentially hit our city.
Great, thanks. Adrian, do you want to take a stab at this one next?
Sure, thank you. So I agree with what's been said, that certainly there are a lot of impacts due to the budget being so little over the past many, many years. But the question, I think, is how do we address those shortfalls going forward? And this is where there's a real opportunity for judicial leadership. One of the stories I love hearing about Judge Waller's work and getting the new courthouse funded was her actually taking a brick from the basement of the courthouse down to the legislature and literally using it as a demonstrative aid to show how her courthouse was crumbling apart. And it really is about being seen as a judge, as a judicial leader, as a third branch of government, as someone who's been elected. Judges need to be seen. And so, and it shouldn't just be one judge. It shouldn't just be the presiding judge or the chief judges. All judges who are elected, and that's all of us in Multnomah County, need to be seen. And that means getting out there and doing the work outside of the courthouse in the community. Going and seeing what needs to be done with the community, how we can help the community. That is the kind of work that's going to be seen and will show people why we now need funding. And then it's also working with community partners and having relationships with community partners prior to going into this is key. And that is why I am so proud that the endorsers that I have, such as Sharon Myron, who is a county commissioner, is endorsing me because I've worked with her for the past 10 years on a variety of mental health issues. People like former Chief of Police Mike Marshman knows me because I worked with him and working with his police department. And the list goes on. Dr. Bethel from the Albina Ministerial Alliance. These are the system partners that we also need to work with, and having those relationships built in place before someone steps onto the bench is going to be key, because those kind of relationships take years to build. And being able to get out there and say, let's work together and figure out how to solve this problem using all the system partners, from the county commissioners to the governor's office, to the state legislature, to the police and the sheriffs, is going to be essential, along with bringing in the community members as well to help that voice be raised as to why more funding is needed. And that's what I would like to do, to bring forward the ability to continue that leadership role and bring people together.
Wonderful, Adrian. Thank you. John?
All right. I guess I'll echo a lot of what everybody's been saying. As far as funding for the judiciary goes, well, I just saw the other day on some voters guide, they listed the salary for this position. And I was pleasantly surprised, but it put in my mind a question of where the money for the judiciary is going. I don't know, what we're spending the money on, but I can tell you that if more money comes in, I'm not going to be asking for a raise. I would rather have that money go to fund more specialty courts. All the counties need to have fully funded specialty courts, jail and prison diversion programs, and it's probably hard for it's kind of a hard pill to swallow, I think, for the government to look at pulling some of the DOC budget, but I really think that some of that should be funneled into preventative programs for the courts. We can shrink the jail populations and increase overall community health by focusing on mental health, because I completely agree with Adrian. Mental health is the main underlying issue, I think, in the majority, at least, of the criminal cases that the court sees. Now, that might just be drug and alcohol addiction, but even beyond that, just other underlying mental health issues that have never been dealt with, that nobody has ever tried to deal with for my clients. And the court system just becomes this revolving door, and we need to focus funding there, staffing those courts, ensuring that, right, wrong or otherwise, that goes with the defense attorneys, of course, but it also goes to the DA's offices, because I know counties where the only reason they have a specialty court is because they got a special grant to fund a DA position. And so if they're not staffed and they can't staff those specialty courts, then they're not going to work. And if we can increase the budget towards those programs, decrease the amount of people that we're sending to prison, decrease the amount of people that have to be put in jail, there's funding there that can come, but we don't have the infrastructure. So I can understand why it would be scary for the legislature to shift money away from one place to another. But frankly, I think that's, well, that's the idea behind restorative justice, which is central to me. But, you know, I think that's where society's mindset is going, trying to get the problem before it becomes a bigger problem.
Thanks, John. And it looks like we have 2 questions that were submitted, and I think they can complement each other and be sort of combined into one. And if we have time to answer one last question from the participants, that'd be wonderful. The first question was, and I'll just read them both, and I think it'll be easy to answer them in one answer. But the first is, what will you do to help foster diversity and help communities of color and other minority communities feel safe and heard? And then the second question was, given that we rarely have a contested judicial election like this, lawyers and legal workers are familiar with candidates, but people outside of the legal community may not be. And so what does the community at large, not the legal community solely, need from the next elected judge? So, you know, thinking of maybe more underrepresented voices in the process historically and currently, if I'll just kind of go back to the original order and we'll just go down the line. But Adrian, if you'd be willing to take that question on, that'd be great.
You want me to answer both questions, or?
Sure. I mean, I feel like they could kind of be combined. As far as, you know, people outside the legal community. Obviously, there's a fair amount of underrepresentation for minorities, people of color in the legal community, you know, lawyers and so on. So if you're willing to try and tackle them together.
Yeah, certainly. I agree. They do go hand in hand in the sense that there is a concern about how do we make sure that underrepresented individuals in our community their voices are being heard. And that is work that I have been focused on for the last decade through my work as the civil rights coordinator with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And one of the key ways to really make sure that voices are being heard can start with judicial leadership just in the courtroom itself. And then I'll expand that out into the larger community. But just in the courtroom itself, a judge has the ability to hire clerks. And it's so important to make sure that the judge is looking at how we can foster diversity throughout our legal bar by looking at who we are able to bring into our courtroom to work with us. So that's one of the first steps a judge can do just as an employer and as a mentor. Furthermore, the judge in her courtroom can make sure that all voices are being heard and respected by the temperament that she brings to the court, as well as making sure that things like just asking someone how they prefer to be referred to, what are their pronouns, making sure that those voices are respected because jurors may not understand that, but a judge being a leader in the courtroom saying, this is how I'm going to run my courtroom, is very important. So that's just a few of the things just right there in the courtroom. And then expanding out, as I mentioned in my last response, getting out into the community and going and having listening sessions about what the community needs, what are some of the issues that the community is seeking to have a court really understand is going to be so important. We cannot assume that we know what the issues are, and we cannot assume that people are going to come into the courtroom to tell us what those issues are. It is vital for judges, as all elected officials do, get out into the community and seek out that input. And also working with stakeholders. So making sure that judges are continually learning themselves. As we continue to evolve, as our society evolves, judges need to evolve. Judges need to be able to be open and be learners and not be in a static set of views. And so it is very important for us to approach these issues with this eye towards what are the implicit biases going on throughout our courtroom and throughout our judiciary. We know from the MacArthur Foundation study that the implicit bias and the impact on underrepresented communities goes throughout the entire justice system, from the arrest to the sentencing judge and beyond to the probation officers. And that's just in the criminal system. So we also have to be aware in looking at stakeholders and how we can do better in making sure we understand these issues. So those are just a few things that I think judicial leaders have an opportunity to bring forward, and which I look forward in bringing forward to help create those voices and to also make space for the ability to learn and do better.
Great, thanks, Adrian. Rima, what are your thoughts on addressing more, less heard voices in the community?
Yeah, so one thing I have been so privileged of is being part of some of the underrepresented, unheard voices in the community. And as a member of that community, I mean, again, we don't have an Arab American Bar Association because there's very few of us. We don't have a Muslim Bar Association because there are very few of us. So for a big part of the Arab and Muslim community, I'm one of the few people they can go to just even to ask questions. I take daily calls from people who don't speak English or who are not comfortable with the court system, who don't trust in the court system. And I try to, if I can't help them, find them somebody. And my friends all know I twist their arms left and right to take and talk to somebody to see if they can help them. Because again, we don't have enough pro bono attorneys out there. So that's something, and I've always, being there, being present. And I've been doing this for years, not in the legal system. I've been doing that in the legal system, but out in the community, founding an organization so people can come together, working, meeting people, going to events, talking to people. It's a listening session, but it's not really a formal listening session. A lot of people from the marginalized communities are not gonna come to a formal, let's have 3 judges sit there and tell them what our problem is, right? You need to be out there. You need to be part of them. You need to be part of the group so they can talk to you. They feel comfortable sharing some of the worst things that has happened to them. You know, the day the Trump Muslim ban went on, my phone was off the hook. I was getting texts, calls, people crying on the phone saying, help, what can we do, right? So being that person, I'm already visible in the community. So when I think there will be a lot of people who are very comfortable coming to me and sharing some of the impact of what we do. So that's one. Students, I mean, giving them clerkship is great, helping them is great, but also being out there. And sometimes the needs are funny. I mean, we used to have silent dance parties for some of the students and other attorneys of colors at my office. Again, just to change, this is not a formal thing. You can come, you can be yourself, there are people who understand you who are not gonna prejudge you, right? As a student, I've been told during law school that I should go and be a housewife by one of the people judging my panels. So is it because my accent was a lot stronger back then? What was it about me that caused that? I mean, I don't even remember his name. But it's important. It's important for the law students to feel welcome, to feel that they are understood, that there are people who will share everything with them. And again, going to meetings is not always the way. We used to go to the Muslim and Arab Police Action Committee till they decided to have an FBI officer sitting there listening to our sessions and join the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So again, being out there, being involved, telling the police, telling others at that time, no, please don't do this. It's gonna affect our community negatively. They didn't listen to us at that time, but now they have. So these are all important, and I've been doing this work for a long time with all of our stakeholders.
Great, Rima, thank you. Sonia?
You did that, okay. I think one of the things that's really important when you're a judge is an ability to connect with the people that are in front of you. Coming from New York and coming from humble beginnings, I still can't believe that I get to do this as a job. And I am very grateful that I ended up here. And it's something I've been able to hold on to for 23 years. I think it's something I'm going to continue to hold on to when I'm elected or appointed, however I get there, but I'm going to get there. So, you know, when I deal with clients, I deal with clients from many different cultures. My background, having grown up in New York, has given me a little bit of a cultural competency where I've been able to break through maybe some other barriers that people who haven't had that background might not be able to get through. I've worked with lawyers on the other side, helping them understand my client's perspective, because they think it's just about winning, and no, it's actually because of the way this client is and where they're coming from. And I think, you know, having someone on the bench who's able to do that as well for the people appearing before them, that will be helpful. I already have been, in terms of, you know, increasing diversity, as the president of the Gus Solomon Inn of Court, I have for 2 years gone out and tried. It's an organization that provides mentorship for younger lawyers and promotes collegiality in the profession. And I made it a point to go out and reach out to people who really needed to network within the legal community. And it was not people who look like me. So I went, you know, I reached out to the Oregon Minority Law Association. I reached out to Lewis and Clark and the Minority Law Student Association. I'm trying to build those connections and open those doors, or just show people, look, and promote, you know, remind people who are in the same position that I am, we have an obligation to do this. And that's, you know, and I like what everyone is saying about, yeah, you have to go out into the community. Judges are strangers to a lot of people. One of the things that we do in Gus Solomon is we do community events, because I want people to understand lawyers are real people, judges are real people. They're just like you, just connect with them, show up, listen, very important. It's not necessarily about us talking to people. So I think those are some of the things I have done. I continue to do them as a judge, and will always treat everyone the same. It will be as level a playing field as possible in my courtroom.
Thank you, Sonia. John?
Thank you. Let's see. Well, to allow our minority communities to feel safe, I was a fairly vocal proponent for the Chief Justice ban on ICE in the courthouse. I've always put the idea of the need to protect people, have the courthouse be a safe place, at the forefront of my practice. As an LGBTQ community member, it's no different than working with communities of color in that aspect, making sure that people feel safe and heard. But in that same line, maybe it was Adrian that was talking about it, but you know, increasing the access to the court is not just about the judges making the place safe, people feel safe to be there and to be heard. But I think pushing and advocating for the alternative paths to legal practice that the bar's investigating is going to be big. I think all the judges need to at least get behind the study of it, right? I can't speak to what it's going to look like in the end, but I think that's going to be major to increase access to the courts from minority groups, or just everybody for that matter, whether or not they're minorities. But listening is huge. I deal with that all the time on the boards that I'm on and things like that. When people are asking me questions about issues that affect Hispanic clients, I am always very careful before answering to try to bring in or refer those people to organizations that are led by people of color that have the answers for them, to make sure that I'm not making decisions for people. I've always done it that way. I always will. What is it? Well, about 30 seconds. I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Great, John. Thank you. Ernie?
Mick Harris, red or yellow, black or white? Red or yellow, black or white? There's no purpose to discriminate on the basis of race, religion, ethnicity, national origin, sex preference. You don't need that in 2020. You know, since I started my practice here in 1990, I've been the managing partner of the first diverse law firm in Oregon's history. And that still remains today. In 2018, the Multnomah Bar Association gave me the mentorship award. The diversity award. I certainly mentored many people from the Multnomah Bar Association. But it's all about being empathetic to groups that are not mainstream. It's being empathetic. I'm willing to do that. I've been on the gang mentorship task force with the DAs, with the judges, with the religious community. Adrian talked about Dr. Bethel. We could do a deeper dive there. And I have put myself on the line for these kids. These kids wouldn't be in a gang if they could look at you and have a person like you to mentor them. They don't have father figures. They're shooting at each other. They get these guns so easily. I'm willing to continue in that regard. I'm willing to continue volunteering at the Junior Olympics. I'm willing to continue every time the Multnomah Bar sends me another person to mentor for a year to meet their requirement. I never turn them down, and I'm willing to go the extra mile. And that's the way I'm going to practice as a judge. You have to go the extra mile with people. You have to know, you got to make the serious decision. Is it public safety at risk? This person has to go away for a significant period of time to keep us safe. On the other hand, is this person a first-time offender? Is this person a drug addict? Does this person have mental health issues? Can we show mercy? I'm willing to do that. And I think that's the way we have to look at this.
Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we went a little over, and I know you're all busy, so thank you. ACS is a 501c3, and while we don't endorse or take positions on candidates, we are so grateful to have the opportunity to get together and share this. So thank you. If anyone who's participating has follow-up questions, all of these fine folks have websites and ways to contact them. I'm sure you can reach out. And thank you all so much, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Good to see everybody.